My name is Mike Iddings, and I'm the host of the YouTube channel Get My Buckle. This channel is all about the Leadville Trail 100 race, the racers, the people, the town, the course, anything to do with Leadville. My guest today, super famous, super accomplished guy. I'm going to give you a couple hints, see if you can guess who it is. 1993 Norba National Champion, two-time World Cup race winner, in 2006 started the Gunnison Trails Western States, six-time Leadville Trail 100 winner. That should do it. And what year were you inducted into the Hall of Fame?
I think 2000.
2000 Mountain Bike Hall of Fame inductee. Our guest today is none other than Dave Wiens. Dave, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. Appreciate it. I'm sure people are going to absolutely love to hear what you have to say, so welcome.
Mike, thank you for having me.
Great. So, what got you to the point where through your, national champion mountain biking racing career, you said, I'm going to take on Leadville. I'm going to go kick its butt.
Well, Leadville was on my radar from the beginning. I had probably heard about the run since it had been around for so long, never had any interest in that. But knew about the mountain bike race once it started there in the early 90s. But we never raced 100 miles. So it was in a different category, different league. I didn't understand or have any comprehension of what it would be like to race 100 miles. But in one of those early years in the mid 90s, I decided I wanted to give it a go. And I called up, and then I realized, it's full. And I called up the Leadville office, and I'm talking to Mara Lee. I don't know Mara Lee at all at the time. And she's like, sorry, the race is full. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a pro. And she goes, don't care if you're Ronald Reagan, you're not getting in the race. And it was so awesome. Even though it was rejection, just full on, I had a lot of respect for that. And then just with my sort of Norba National World Cup schedule, it never came up again until 2002. And in 2002, I went through the proper channels. And in those days, you filled out an application, right? And I sent the application in.
With the check.
With a check. And in, I think, January of 2003, I got a letter back, and then I got my check back, and it said, sorry, you're not in. We didn't pull your name out of the lottery. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the race in 2002. 2003, did it again, and got the card back, and I got in. So that was cool. That was my first one. And honestly, I just wanted to try to race 100 miles and see what it was like. And, did the race in 2003. And, in those days, you'd get that big packet in the mail, and it had the double backed, race manual. On one side, it was the mountain bike. On the other side, it was the run. And I'm obsessed with courses. And I remember looking at the map and trying to figure out the course, because I'm going to, what's the course? I'm looking at this map. The map wasn't very good. And then I realized this race is an out and back. And that just, I've never even heard of an out and back mountain bike race before, but that's what it was. And so then I knew that, and, went to Leadville in 2003, and actually had a really good race with Bryson Perry. And I didn't know the course. I got there the day before. I knew roughly where it went from the map, but that was about it. And my family had fished at Twin Lakes when we were kids, so I kind of knew the general area. But the day before, and this became my routine, I would ride up St. Kevin's and just ride that part of the course down the power line and back to town. That was sort of my pre-race ride. So I knew that much of it. And if you know that much of it, you also kind of can guess what it's like going the other direction. Power line is going to be really steep going up, and St. Kevin's and all that. So, but had probably my best race until Floyd showed up, as far as the competition with Bryson, because Bryson was super fast. He had won, I think, the two previous Leadvilles, 2001, 2002. Great guy, fast racer from Salt Lake. And he was gone on Powerline. I think we stayed together to the top of Powerline. He was a really good descender, descended really fast, and he was just gone. And I remember, going there on the pipeline section through those kind of gravel roads, and I could see in the corners, he was actually, getting loose. I could see the marks where I'm like, this guy's flying. I'm riding for second place right now. And, but I'll keep going and just see how it goes. And then at some point when Columbine opens up and you can see a little bit halfway up, there he was. And I caught him by the time we got to the top. And then he put, a minute and a half or 2 minutes or more in me on the descent down Columbine. So now I'm chasing again. And in those days, we used to race something that was called the Cobra or the North Face, which was that hike-a-bike between Twin Lakes and Pipeline inbound. And it was a pretty massive hike-a-bike. And there's no way you're riding an old nasty old Jeep road, baby head rocks and everything. And I was watching him go up that, and I was a ways away. I was still, a minute and a half probably behind him. But I could just tell by his body language that he was struggling. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to be able to reel him back in. I don't have to do anything rash. I can just keep riding this pace. And sure enough, I think we got together right around the Pipeline aid station, and then we traded poles. And then right before we went up power line, he just said, I'm cramping up. I'm done. I think he'd gone out a little too hard. And so then I got a gap there and I rode away from him. But, that was the closest race I had until 2007 when Floyd showed up. But again, I did that first race and it was great. It was fun. I had a good time. It was hard, and could barely turn the pedals over at the end. And my time was whatever it was, 6:08, 6:07, something like that. Or no, I'm sorry, 7:07. So it wasn't a record. The record didn't break. It was within a couple minutes though. But I've never really been about the record personally for whatever reason. It hasn't interested me, but I never then said, okay, I'm coming back and I'm going to do this race a whole bunch of times in a row. I just went home and, did whatever. And in the winter at some point, Ken calls up, champ, are you in? We got to wrap this thing up. Are you in? Sure. And that's kind of how it started. Every year it was that. Yeah, okay, I'll do it again. It was close to my house. It's fun to train for. I enjoyed the race. And I honestly always felt that there was something about the Leadville Trail 100 that would catch on with more people. And to me, it was a really compelling race. And a lot of mountain bikers poo-pooed it. There's no single track. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of like a road race on mountain bikes, but it's long, it's hard. There's a ton of climbing. There's some dynamics early in the race with riding in a group. You've got almost every kind of surface out there, from flats to some undulations to super steep climbing, pushing the bike. Not many of the top folks push anymore, but in those years, I was always pushing up that steep bit on power line. Never had to get off on Columbine. Was always pretty lucky to keep it going up Columbine. The North Face was in there for a few years, right up through 2008. And they took that out and put that single track in. That was always a hike-a-bike. So it just had a lot of really interesting elements to me. And I thought, man, if there were, a bunch of good racers here, it would be some pretty interesting racing. But that was before gravel was huge. And it is kind of in that spirit of gravel racing, the Leadville. Not a lot of single track, not super technical, but pretty compelling racing. So yeah. Then they started to add up, I guess. And I would do it year after year there for a while.
And you mentioned Floyd. What was, what are a couple of highlights of the Floyd race?
The Floyd race was it was a good one. It was my best sort of race with another competitor, I think, as far as the racing itself. The race with Lance was a lot of fun, but Floyd was right to the wire. But to back up a little bit, and why was Floyd even at the Leadville Trail 100 when he had just won the Tour de France? I think because of Chris Carmichael, I'm certain you can trace Lance's presence at the race back to Chris. I think Chris got him interested in it. And in 2006, late in the year, sort of November, December, there was something at bicycling.com where Lance Armstrong said, I'm going to do the Leadville 100 in 2007. And I'm like, oh, interesting. That got my attention immediately, because ever since the race with Bryson, with all due respect, I was never with another rider after the Twin Lakes aid station outbound. I would get off away going up Columbine, and I never saw another rider all the way to the finish line. So, and that's because there were some good riders there, but the really good riders weren't there, obviously. So here was an opportunity. Oh, this is going to be different racing this guy. So I was really excited about it. But within a week of that story coming out, Floyd Landis put in, hey, yeah, I'm going to do it too. And so we'll have Lance Armstrong and Floyd Landis. Well, within a week of that, another, bit comes out, says it's Lance Armstrong saying, actually, I got something going on that weekend. I can't do it. But Floyd was still in. So all of a sudden my motivation completely changed. And I had never really trained per se for the Leadville 100. I just rode my bike a lot and did a lot of long rides, but I'd never gone out and kind of mapped out a program. So knowing that I was going to be racing against Floyd and maybe Lance, I wasn't sure. I mapped out a program beginning with the Firecracker 50 in Breckenridge on the July 4th race. Great race. I would just ride my bike, do a little bit of intensity, whatever, leading up to that. Do that race, take 3 or 4 days off the bike, and then I mapped out a training program through Leadville. So the rest of July and the first part of August. And it was just my old cross-country training, kind of dusted off, and maybe some longer rides in there. Nothing too off the top, but definitely some specific training that I was doing. And then, had that race with Floyd. And I mean, the memorable parts of that race are, first, it was a gorgeous day. It was just bluebird spectacular. And he and I got away, and we're going over up Sugarloaf. We're just dropping into Powerline, the top of Powerline. And he's in front of me, and I'm the only person that saw this in the whole world. He washes out going, pretty fast, 30 miles an hour. Just, how it's all loose up there, those ruts. He just laid it down. And if you look back on those pictures, his hip he had just had his hips resurfaced or something. He was actually riding for the medical implant, medical device company that made his hip.
His nephew, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So he went down hard, and I'm like, you okay? And he's like, yeah, nah, I'm fine. He's a tough guy. But that's how it kind of started, watching Floyd slide out at, whatever, 30 miles an hour, and that decomposed granite stuff was gnarly. And then we stayed together all the way until we got to where after Twin Lakes outbound, you kind of go through all that sage country, and then you make a hard right onto that road, and you're heading up into the woods of Columbine. I get on his wheel, and I'm like, okay, good, this is great. And then he just rode me off his wheel. I was completely blown away how he just powered away from me and was gone. No more Floyd. He's completely gone. I'm like, God. But I'm not going to give up. But I'm like, I'm probably riding for second place here because I've never seen power like that. But then all of a sudden, halfway up, Columbine gets steeper and looser and more technical. And there he is, and I can see him. And now I'm bringing him back. So I brought him back on all of that, got with him, kind of like the Bryson Perry race. And we topped out together. We turned around, we descended together. And then he was getting a flat. I don't know if he had a low tire or a proper flat, but he stopped for a wheel change in Twin Lakes, and that's where a gap formed. And so I'm going, and I'm heading towards Pipeline Aid Station, but I'm not even close yet. And all of a sudden, I've got a low rear tire, and we're running pretty light, what we called ghetto tubeless back at that time. There weren't good tires for tubeless. You'd take a regular tire and you'd make it tubeless, and it was the whole process. And everyone who's done this knows you'd wake up in the morning, your tire's flat. So there's always that, man, is my tire even going to hold air this entire race? So I'm getting a low flat. I start to let the air out of it. I'm going to put a tube in it. And then all of a sudden it's sealed because I had a little ding in my rim. That's why it was leaking. A little ding in my rim, hit a rock or something. And then it's sealed at about, I don't know, probably, 15 PSI. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go with this and see. It's holding right now. So I had a pretty low rear tire. And I keep going. I go through Pipeline. We get on that pavement heading towards Powerline. And there's an L there where you make a left turn, and I could see back. And I could see a tiny orange speck. It was Floyd, but he was a long ways away. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good here. And so I just do that bit up by the hatchery, and then you go a couple ups and downs on the pavement, and then you turn onto the dirt of Powerline climb. And right there in the bottom, and that was in the days when there weren't very many people out on the course, but there were a couple folks there at the very bottom of the climb, and they see me coming. They're like, go Dave, go Dave. And then all of a sudden I hear, go Floyd, go Floyd. And I turn around, and the guy's 20 meters behind me. And I'm like, oh, and then it kind of hit me, the guy's got power. He can ride the flats. And at that point, again, in my mind, my immediate reaction was, I'm going to get second. And then I was like, actually, this is a pretty steep climb. He's not really going to like this that much. So I'll just see what happens. And, sure enough, and even I pushed my bike up the steep bit, and he did too. Pushed my bike, rode as far as I could, got off, pushed up the steep bit, did a little descent, and then all the rest of it. Never looked around, because I don't like to look around. What's not going to change. I'm going as hard as I can. I'm going as hard as I can, thinking I can get to the finish line. And finally, at the very top, I look around. He's not there. I'm like, okay, good. Nurse that low tire down Sugarloaf. It's pretty rocky. Get on the gravel, go around the lake, start heading up the pavement. Get to the top where you're going to turn on the dirt again. Same thing. Some people there. Go, Dave. Go, Dave. Go, Floyd. I turn around, and there he is. He's right back on my butt. So same thing. He never caught me. He never got on my wheel, but he was nipping at my heels a couple times. And then finish the St. Kevin's dirt and descend. And I'm nursing this low rear tire. He might be doing the same thing. I don't know. And get to the boulevard. And I'm on the boulevard, and I can look back and I can see him, but he's a ways back, but I can see him. He's wearing that orange and white kit. And that's when you're at that point where this is it. This is all you have. There's not another depth that you can dig into. And so if he's able to bridge that gap, he's going to beat me. I just know that. And so it's so, and I think everybody's probably experienced it at one time or another, where there is no more. This is it. And if this gets me to the finish line, I'll win. If it doesn't, I'm going to get second. But it got me to the finish line. I won by, I don't know if it was a minute or what, but it was close. So that race was just so intense, kind of, start to finish, not start so much. I mean, there were some times in there where we were just cruising. But to finish with that kind of intensity was really special. So that's certainly the best sort of, competitive race that I've had at Leadville in all those years.
What a great story. Love it. I can't wait to, it'll be interesting, because I will get Floyd on this show, and we'll hear the other side of that. And
yeah.
I think it's going to be awesome, because Floyd's a great guy. He is hilarious. He loves to joke around. It will be interesting to hear his side of it.
Yeah, no, he was. He raced mountain bikes for a number of years, and I knew him. He was super quiet as a mountain bike racer. One of his buddies, Willie, was a lot more the life of the party, where Floyd would just kind of sit back. But at that race that day, he came to the finish line and was hanging out with everybody and talking, super down to earth. And we haven't really stayed in touch, but every once in a while, I've run into him and said hi to him. I'm seeing that he's doing some gravel races now, and he's involved in some cool stuff. But I always liked Floyd. And we're both Mennonites, or we come from Mennonite background, so we have that in common.
Interesting. Okay, I guess since we're on the pro Leadville tangent, maybe you could share a little bit of the Lance experience with everybody. How did those races go?
Sure. That next year with Lance, again, I wasn't ever sure he was going to come, but I was sure enough he was going to come that I was going to train as if he was going to come. So I trained kind of the same way, same program that I did the year before, starting with the firecracker and all that. And I remember I was really trying to set up a light bike, as light as possible. And this is when Stan's wheels, he was just getting his start, pretty small company at the time. Now they're big. And I was talking to Stan, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll set you up with wheels and aluminum rotors and the Crow tire, and here's what you need to do. And so I'm working with Stan, and he's so funny. He's like, and Dave, you want to run these at about 17 PSI? I'm like, Stan, I weigh 185 pounds, 17. He goes, well, you want to win, don't you? I'll never forget him saying that to me. But anyway, so setting up this light bike, doing my training. This is all in sort of July. And then he calls me one day, Stan, and he goes, so Dave, I just want to, full disclosure, I just sent Lance the exact same wheel set I sent you. So he looked closely at Lance's bike that year, 2008. We're running identical wheels and identical tires. We're both running the Crow. We're both running his really lightweight wheels. So that was interesting. And again, I wasn't ever sure that he was going to come to the race. I think when Stan called me, that was within 2 weeks of the race. So I could have been in August. But I have a friend here who he just said it was a close enough connection to Lance, and he told me about it in the spring. he said, "Oh no, I know so-and-so, and he heard from so-and-so. Lance is definitely racing the Leadville 100," because he never mentioned anything about it, I don't believe. After he pulled out of the race against Floyd, he didn't talk about it again. But again, I prepared as if he was going to be there, and sure enough, the confirmation came, but just a week or two out. And then, sure, I got nervous and all that, but then I would always fall back on, you've done your training, you put the time in, so the chips are going to fall where they will. And there was a lot of, sort of, hubbub about Lance being there, and it was super cool and all of that. And, that race started, and it was super slow. This was the last year that the Leadville 100 started slow. We were going, I mean, there were 25 of us going up Columbine, quite a ways up, not broken out into the open yet, but it was a huge group, and the pace was really low. And then for whatever reason, Lance just went to the front, and I jumped on his wheel. He didn't attack, but he just picked up the pace. And I turned around after a couple minutes, and there was nobody. It was just Lance and myself. So we just rode together the entire race, trading off poles up to the top, not talking. At one point, he said, "So Dave, are you a school teacher?" I'm like, "No, not a school teacher, just a guy, whatever." He said, "Are we gonna walk, or are we gonna push up the? Are we gonna walk? Or are we gonna ride the power line?" I said, "I always walk it," and that's all. He didn't. It wasn't a conversation. He asked me that one question. I gave him my answer. I usually walk it, and that was it, no more. And so when we got there, and the weather that year, there was a little bit of rain at times, not during the race, but leading up to it. So the traction was really good. And he just didn't get off his bike. But I had really good form that year, and so I was able to just stay on his wheel. And we rode the steep part of lower power line, which was the first time I ever rode it. I never even considered riding it. I always thought it did me, right to get off my bike and stretch my legs, stretch my back. You're not losing that much time by not riding it. But we rode it, and that was all good. And then, you do that little descent, and then you do the next bit, which isn't as steep, but it's pretty rocky. And well, let me back up to the Cobra. The last year the Cobra was in the race, that hike-a-bike. And I have a strategy for that. And this is back in the days of the triple chain ring. Okay, so you got grand gear, middle ring, big ring. So my strategy there, I'm going to go into my middle ring, my biggest cog. I'm going to ride it a little ways, and then I'm going to just step off, and I'm going to walk up it and get back on and go. And I've trained for that. I mean, literally, I trained to do that in my hiking, because I think if you aren't trained to push your bike up a big hill, you're not going to do it very well, and it's going to end up taking something out of you. So we get there, and I'm kind of doing that, and I step off, and Lance comes around me in his granny gear, and he's trying to ride it. And so he gives it a good effort to try to ride it, but then he has to come off, and he's straddling his bike, and then I just slowly just stepped up. And there's a YouTube video which shows this. It's pretty interesting to watch. It just shows that one bit. Someone was there with a phone or something. But I gapped him there, and it was a pretty decent gap by the time I got to the top. And I didn't attack, but I just kept the pace, going. And then he caught back up to me, and that was just sort of, maybe that was a little, gut punch on my part, and him riding the power line was a gut punch on his part. Testing each other out a little bit.
Right.
But then, so I'm sorry, we were on the power line, and then I gapped him going up the power line, the last bit, the bigger part of the climb, but not as steep, but pretty rocky. And I just went to the front, and I couldn't hear him, but I wasn't looking back because I don't like to look back. And then I got pretty much at the top, just like Floyd. I look back, and I can't see anybody. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then again, pretty cautious going down Sugarloaf, as I always am. Having those lightweight tires and wheels and everything, the bike just felt so fragile compared to the bikes now. And sure enough, he caught me by the time we got on the gravel at Sugarloaf, and then around the lake, and we rode up the pavement together, and we're just trading poles. And then all of a sudden, when we went onto the dirt, I was pulling, and I pulled back. He's like, "No, I'm done. Go." And I'm like, "No, come on, no." He's like, "No, I'm done." And I was like, "All right." And then I punched it. Didn't attack again. I just kept the pace where I'd been riding it. Maybe I picked it up a little bit. And I look back every now and then, and I could still see that yellow and black jersey. So he hadn't given up. So he was still coming. But at some point I was like, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm strong. I can do this. And I remember going all the way, riding the entire boulevard, all the way over St. Kevin's, down and up Boulevard was good. I'm looking, he's not there, he's not there. And then just before the hospital hill, as I'm climbing up toward that, my rear tire suddenly starts losing air. And I remember I'm just like, and that's a far enough to where, you know, if all of a sudden you're riding on a rim, that might not work that well. I remember my son and his friend were right there. They're like, go Dad, go Dave. I'm like, oh, you guys, I think I've got a flat tire. And it just, you know, kind of got in my head, but luckily it wasn't bad. It probably was down to 10 or 12 PSI, like was on the red carpet crossing. You can look at those photos and see that the rear tire is really low, but it held. But I think that's why, you know, a friend of mine's like, dude, you got a funny look on your face when you cross the finish line there. I'm like, yeah, it was kind of bizarre because of the way my tire went flat and just everything. It's just this maybe more of a look of relief than anything else. But yeah, I ended up winning that race, and that was cool and a lot of fun. You know, I felt really lucky that I was, you know, happened to be in a position to get that. Those last 2 years, I mean, essentially, I got a private race with Floyd, and I got a private race with Lance. There were a ton of other bike racers in the world that would have, you know, probably kicked both of our asses, or would have for sure, but they weren't there.
But they weren't there.
You know, there were some better racers. Once Floyd was in the race, that started to bring in some better riders. You know, Manny Prado and Mike Closer, and you know, there were some definitely some faster folks that started to take an interest in the race, but it was only because of those names. Wasn't because of my name. It was, you know, Floyd Landis or Lance Armstrong. You know, this is, you know, something I want to be a part of. But and then he came back in 2009 and just kicked my ass.
Oh man, it's hard to hear you say that. You know, that doesn't happen very often. And since we're you know, Dave mentioned his tires, those were Stan's Clovers, you said?
Crow, like the
Crow.
bird. Stan's Crow.
Stan's Crow, but they have the clover knobby. It looks like a clover.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So for for your newbies coming to Leadville, and you want to look at some history, go into the Lifetime retail store and look up. When you walk in, look up. There's Dave's bike, and look at the tires: 26ers, V brakes, triple crank, and then these tires that are not much. So when everybody's getting all crazy in the tire and the pressure and all that, look at those tires, and probably what you have going to be just fine, and probably way more tire than you need, believe me, because those things are almost nothing. And you and Lance had the same exact setup on the wheels and tires.
Yep. Yeah, because at that time, you know, Stan had the corner of the market on that really lightweight tubeless. He brought tubeless to mountain biking. And it was very tenuous in those early years, because you didn't have a tubeless tire. You were taking a regular tire and making it work by sealing the casing, and then by having the sealant in there.
Right. And think, you know, look at those tires, and then envision clearing Columbine, clearing the bottom of Powerline, almost clear the North Face, which is no longer in the race, but so you can do it on some pretty low profile, fast running tires.
Yeah, for sure.
That was because every time I go in that store, I look at those tires and I'm just like, man, you know, the big debate over tires, and look what won it. Oh, so do you have a Levi story, or was that your year also, right?
Yeah. Then my last year was 2010, and there is a Levi story. It's just that he won the race and set a new course record. I wasn't really even a part of that story. I ended up fourth that year. But I'm proud of that race because, and that was Jeremy Horgan Kabelski, JHK, you know, US Olympian, US national champion, super fast rider. Todd Wells, that was his first year. I think it went Levi, then JHK, then Todd. I think it was that order. JHK and Todd might have been flipped. And then I was fourth, and that's my fastest time to date. 6 hours, 32 or 33 minutes and change. So I'm proud of that one because it was a fast time, my fastest time, and I didn't win, but you know, the caliber of rider was changing at that time, and so there was getting to be more and more depth in the race, and we know that since then it's just continued to change, and then I think it has really accelerated in the last say, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 years. It's become, I mean, it's always been really competitive, but I think there's just way more depth in the field now. There's way more men and women who are just fantastic racers. That it's a part of the Lifetime Grand Prix has really helped. I mean, that's a really cool series. I don't follow European cross country racing. I don't follow UCI cross country racing at all. I follow the Lifetime Grand Prix because I know some of the cast of characters that are out there. I think it's really interesting, compelling racing, kind of mixing up gravel and mountain. And yeah, now Leadville has really become. I mean, it'd be so hard to win that race now. Keegan obviously is a generational talent in what he's doing. But then you've got that race for second, which is pretty compelling because there's just a ton of guys that could on the men's side. I'm more familiar with the men in the race that could get that second place. And we'll see what happens this year. I mean, you never know year to year.
Right.
But I expect Keegan to remain strong. But who knows? At some point, Keegan may go race on the road or something. He's just so thoroughly dominated the Grand Prix and this style of domestic racing. It's been really fun to watch.
Phenomenal athlete, huh? So from your perspective, somebody who's super fast champion, what do you see that advanced the times from 7 hours to sub 6?
Well, it's what I call searching for speed. They're looking for speed from start to finish in every place they can. Like I said, 2008 and before, race started super slow. I mean, literally in 2007, the race with Floyd, we were bumping up against the law enforcement vehicle. We were going that slow down the hill. So that added, a minute or 2 minutes. Now you saw it this year, law enforcement, they tell them, get the heck out of the way. And it was completely strung out going down the pavement. And I believe there was a guy in there whose job it was to just set a torrid pace from the beginning. And that's what it is. It's searching for speed from start to finish. It's not like getting in a group and looking around and wondering who's going to do what, which is what it was for the most part when I was racing in the beginning. Now there's going to be a selection, and if you're not super fit, you're not going to be in that selection. And then that selection's probably as there's a bit of a gentlemanly agreement in gravel, I think, that everybody pulls their weight, and so everyone's kind of helping out up there. I think they can go faster. I think if you really started to drop, more team tactics into the race, and somebody wanted to really utilize a larger team and sacrifice some guys and save somebody for the end, because it was Keegan rode, I believe he rode all of Columbine up, and he rode alone all that. What if he had what if there were 3 or 4 riders on that pace? So I think there's still time to be made, but that's the difference. They're just looking for speed from start to finish, and they're phenomenal athletes.
Right. And from your perspective, did you ever race it with a 1x? Probably not, huh?
No. Man, I'm trying to remember if it got to be. I don't think so. I think we might have been a 2x at some point in there, but I really don't think so.
Do you remember the 2x? Do you remember the 2x versus the 3x, if you liked one better than the other overall?
Yeah, no, the 2x was a step in the right direction, because we were starting to have a larger range on the rear cog, and you have one less sketchy shift. I mean, that shift into your what we call the granny gear was, the chain was going to get pinged off, once every so many shifts. You were going to jam it every so many shifts. Taking that shifting out, not only did we reduce weight, but that was always, the front chainring was always a very, it takes a little bit of purposefulness and skill to do a good front derailleur shift. You can't shift under full power.
Right.
And even if you do everything right, it still might ball up somehow. So yeah, 1x, well, I'm a huge fan of the 1x.
Huge fan of the 1x. All right. So just a couple bullet point questions. For you, would you hardtail or full suspension now?
Boy, I don't know. If I were, a young, fit racer, I would probably, I might still run a hardtail there. I never got to ride a 29er there. I watched the Ergon boys, Alban and those guys kind of go back and forth. And the year he set the record that just now finally got broken, he was on a hardtail, and he had ridden he had set the record, I think, on a fully the year before. He ended up going back to a hardtail. There's something about a hardtail; it's just so light and so fast. But I can't even, comprehend the way these guys descend now. And that might play into it for them as well. If they're feeling like, yeah, I couldn't really descend the way I want to descend on a hardtail, I need a fully for that. But for me and the way I ride, I'm pretty cautious on the descents. I would probably think hardtail.
Huh. All right. What about dropper versus no dropper?
Oh, I really resisted the dropper for a long time, which was silly, as everybody who's who knows about the dropper knows. Now I want a dropper on my townie bike. I can't ride without it. So I would take just for fun riding, like around anywhere, even a rocky place here like Hartman Rocks near Gunnison. I would take a hardtail and a dropper before I'd ride a fully with a high post. I just think it's one of the very best innovations that has made mountain biking. Just it's always fun. I mean, tubeless tires, the one by dropper post, disc brakes, the things that have happened in the last sort of generation of innovation have made mountain bikes just absolutely amazing. But with that being said, when I was first delivered a Diamondback mountain bike, 26-inch wheels, fully rigid, toe clips, no clipless pedals, in 2000 or not 2000, geez, 1988 or 89, I felt like I had a Yamaha 125 YZ. I mean, that bike was so badass because there was nothing else like it, and the places I could go on that bike. But that's just sort of the way the technology evolves, right?
Oh my goodness. Man, that's it just interesting to hear that. So with and you were involved with Ken and Mary Lee when it was the old school Leadville and the different logo. And then you were part of the as Lifetime came on. What's your perspective and your feel with that the corporate versus the grassroots stuff?
Oh yeah, and I didn't. That transition was happening right as I was having those. I forget the first time Lifetime was a sponsor, and initially they were just a sponsor, and then they obviously purchased the event from Ken and Mary Lee. They brought a lot of really good stuff to the brand. The Leadville Race Series, I was involved in that for a long time. They started to spread it around the country. We had the Wilmington Whiteface 100 in New York. We had the Tahoe Trail in Lake Tahoe, the Austin Rattler. The Leadville stage race was really cool. And I did the first two of those. So they brought some really good stuff to the event. Very, very much you're talking grassroots, Ken and Mary Lee. I know that for them, they're like, when Lance came and they had to put barriers up, they're like, wow, come on. What do we need barriers for? Little things like that. But what I always tell people, if somebody, happens to be a little bit pining for those grassroots times, I'm like, just walk away from the finish area and get out on the course. The course is the same. All those climbs are still there. They're just as nasty as ever. Lifetime's not out there grooming the race course or anything. You always hear that, like, I think Lifetime went out and they smoothed out Columbine. I'm like, yeah, I think that's just Forest Service or county maintenance that happens every once in a while. So they've done a lot of really great things. The Grand Prix, huge fan of that. And they brought it to a lot more folks. So it kind of happened at the same time with the race really starting to grow in popularity. And it's important to point out that, yeah, there's the pro race gets a lot of attention and the race at the front, but Leadville from the beginning, and this, more than anybody with your story, it's not about that. It's about the masses. And yeah, there's that, let's see who wins. That's cool. Those guys are amazing. Those ladies are fantastic. But there's so many other, every walk of life is represented out there. The goals, 8 hours, 9 hours, just finishing the darn thing, big buckle, little buckle, getting even to a cutoff, making the cutoffs at a certain point for some riders is a really big deal. And I just know how important it is in people's lives to have something like the Leadville, Trail 100. And a big part of it to me, and I think to a lot of other folks too, the race is the cherry on top. It's the whole journey. that you embark upon once you know you're in for a certain year. And that usually happens, I think, in January or February. You know, okay, I'm lining up on the second Saturday in August at 6th and Harrison, and there's no going back. And so it defines your life for those months leading up to it in a really powerful and meaningful way, even though everyone still has all the challenges life throws at us happening at the same time. So it's really cool, and Lifetime has just enabled that to continue to happen and actually spread it out so where you've got this qualifying series now. People can kind of cut their teeth. The stage race is a great way to ride the entire Leadville 100 course over 3 days. They've brought a lot to it, and that Ken and Mara Lee are still front and center is a big part of that. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to buy this and those guys are gone. They're still the faces of the race. And I mean, some of my funnest times involved with the Leadville race series were when we were going around and doing all those qualifiers. And it was, Ken and Mara Lee and myself and Rebecca Rush and the race crew, Josh Cawley and, Abby and a whole bunch of folks. And we were basically putting races on. And at the end of the race, we'd given out all the coins and everybody had left, and you have to break down. And there's no two people working harder at loading that van than Ken and Mara Lee and loading the trailers. They're just salt of the earth. And those were some of the best times that I ever had. Sure, racing's great, and I love all that, and we got to breakfast, getting to spend time and know Ken and Mara Lee. And that was really, at the races, they're too busy to get much time with. But it was pretty special to travel with them to those qualifiers, the Austin Rattler and Tahoe and Wilmington, and just get to spend time with them. We go out to breakfast or we go out to dinner, and they're just great folks. And that part of it's never changed. Love Chemo and Bahram and everybody with Lifetime. And it's just a big team and a big family that emanates out to anybody who's ever, even considered doing the event. So they always talk about the Leadville family, and there's certainly, there's a lot to that.
There's a lot to that, and they're sincere about it. I mean, they are 100% sincere about the whole family component, and it is, you feel it. And that whole, they're merely, they stress Leadville. You don't find Leadville, Leadville finds you, and they are, and they mean it. Yeah. I mean, they mean it, because when you get involved with Leadville, whatever capacity, you're in. I mean, you're part of the family and you're in, and they're going to, they are so sincere about, they want to see you cross that finish line. I mean, they'll do whatever they can. I've seen them help people in different ways to make sure that they were either getting ready or getting through or whatever. I mean, it's awesome. They're just awesome people. Yeah.
No, anybody who's been a part of it, from whether a competitor, supporting a rider who's out there, or helping with the race, it changes your life. It definitely, you have a little different perspective after being a part of it. It's really cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned the other races for the qualifiers. Is there anything out? I haven't done any of them except Leadville. So are there any other races, the qualifiers, that are even close to Leadville?
They're just different, and they're 100Ks, so they're shorter. But you have kind of the same vibe there, and the coins are coveted. The coins are your entry. You can qualify for the event. I've actually never done the Silver Rush. That's one race I haven't done. But I think the ones that are left that I know of are the Tahoe Trail, which is a really great event in the Lake Tahoe area out of the North Star Resort, and then the Austin Rattler. And there's a new venue with the Rattler now that I haven't been to the new venue, but the other place we raced at was a kick. And, Texas has deep roots in mountain biking and mountain bike racing. And then I know there's the Lutsen 99er, which I have not done. And I'm not sure if there are some other qualifiers, but they're a kick. And if you're looking to get in, or just looking, if you're near those events, or you can travel to them, they're fun events. And they have a lot of feel of Leadville, but you can't replicate 10,200 feet Leadville is one of a kind. It always will be. I mean, yeah, here's kind of a little taste, but it's not a full glass for sure.
It's not a full glass. Well, yeah, it's hard to duplicate 12,600 feet with sideways sleet and wind and two-way traffic going down and wet rocks. And Yeah, that's a hard thing to replicate anywhere.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The views, the energy, the whole nine.
Oh man. So are you ever coming back?
I feel like I've done my thing at Leadville. If I go back, I would go back just to be part of the race. I don't think I will line up again. Honestly, I like to um, kind of find pretty low key races that are small, grassrootsy, and check those out. I'm signed up for a gravel race in July called the Cowtown Classic up in Kremlin. I'm excited about that, but I don't see myself, lining up at Leadville again. And nothing against the race at all, but I feel like I've had, in my career, I've had some horrible races that were just terrible, and I don't quit. I don't like to quit, so I'll finish those. I mean, I'm finishing the World Cup, and they're taking the finish line apart when I'm coming across the line. I'm so far back, and I don't want to have that experience at Leadville. And I always know it's a possibility to just get out there and not have that great day. And I've always had pretty decent days there, and I kind of want to keep it that way. So um, yeah, I'd say I won't be lining up at the Leadville 100, and I certainly am not going to do the run.
Are your boys going to do it?
There would be one, our son Cooper, who enjoys bike racing. He's talked about it before. I don't know if he'll be able to realize it or not. The good thing about the Leadville 100 is that it's going to be around for many years for him. So he'll have the opportunity now, or in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. It's always there, and it's so great to have a challenge like that always available to us when we decide to take it on. And I'm in that same boat. If all of a sudden I get a wild hair and I want to do Leadville again, assuming I can find my way into the race somehow and get an entry, I'll be able to line up and give it a go.
And if your son Cooper says, "Hey, Dad, come on, you gotta try and beat me."
I could be really good team support for him. Because I think by the time he does it, I'm going to be, I'll be pretty old.
Wow. All right. So what kind of advice, what kind of bullet point, just some general advice things for people coming first timers, that have, they don't know what to expect. They're like, oh man, I'm trying to get all the information I can. What can Dave bring to the table for them? Just to help them set the compass.
Yeah. First and foremost, I would say don't listen to the chatter, because there's a lot of chatter about preparation for Leadville, and there are some people out there who are a bit of absolutists to say you need to do this to be successful, and I don't agree with that. I think there's a wide spectrum of ways you can be successful. So don't get caught up in the chatter, because that just starts creating doubt in people's minds. If they hear, oh, you can't do that, you'll never be successful, because people will say those kinds of things online or in person. And if you have that mindset where you get kind of taken by that, it can be disruptive. So I would say, tune out that real specific chatter you hear, and ride your bike. There's no substitute for riding your bike. I've talked to some people, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do a lot of plyometrics, and I'm like, dude, plyometrics aren't going to get you up Columbine. You need to ride your bike. There's no substitute for that. So get your training in. It depends on where you live, what your life is like, what your work is, what your family is. There's people that aren't able. I mean, the majority of the field cannot train as effectively. They can't do the perfect training. Their life won't allow it. But you need to try to optimize what you can, and then go in with a realistic, understanding of how you've prepared and what that means, and then pace yourself accordingly. And I think this is where a lot of people make a mistake, is they go too fast too soon in the beginning, because they get caught up in the enthusiasm. It's a relatively inexperienced field once you drop back a ways, and generally folks who haven't done a lot of bike racing go too hard in the beginning, and they kind of they can blow themselves up to make it really hard later on. And you have to be really patient, and you have to be able to let people pass you in the beginning, to hold on. And now there's your power meters and your heart, all these devices that can, if you understand the numbers you're looking at, they can keep you from going too hard. I think it sometimes later in the race, it bottlenecks at St. Kevin's, and people get kind of frustrated because they're not moving, just relax. It'll thin out, get into a groove. If you're comfortable riding in a group, get on as many wheels as you can, but really carefully pace yourself. I mean, the way I approached my first Leadvilles was I'd pick a gear I thought I could ride, then I'd go one easier. And at times I'm thinking I can go a lot harder than this, but by the end of the race, I can barely turn the pedals over. So I know I did the right thing by pulling back early. And I think that's really important advice for folks that are newer to the event. If you've done it once or twice or three times, you're starting to understand a lot more about what to do. But if you're a first timer, that pacing piece is really important. And you're almost certainly going to get passed by a lot of people because that enthusiasm I talk about is rampant. And there's people just flying, and there's no way they're going to be able to. I mean, they're writing checks that their legs cannot cash later on. And so if you're disciplined, you're going to pass 3, 4, 5 times more people than pass you later in the race, because people are just going to start, dropping like flies. And then keep moving. I just wouldn't ever go into a feed zone and sit in a chair. One foot in front of the other. You got to keep making that progress. Definitely get into the feed zone, get what you need. You don't need to freak out, but keep moving. Keep moving. Sometimes when you stop, your body's like, okay, we're done, and it'll shut down. So keep moving. If you start cramping, just keep moving. A lot of times you can ride through cramps. It sucks. I would get cramps almost every time at Leadville, different places, and you just try to ride through those as much as you can. And keep that positive attitude, and don't let the try to even out the lows and the highs, because you're going to have those during the race. You're going to have moments where you feel just awful, and you need to go, okay, don't sink that low. You have times you feel really good. Okay, don't go up that high. Just stay in that middle band. And if you operate in there, knowing you're going to have lows, knowing you're going to have highs, keeping your eye on the prize, which is getting back to the finish line, I think you'll do well. It's better to have that a little bit something left at the end than to blow it all in the beginning and have nothing. Be limping up the power line or limping up the pavement to St. Kevin's, as opposed to, okay, I'm feeling good. This is good. And don't forget about the boulevard. I mean, the boulevard it's a crusher at the end of that thing, just absolutely a crusher. So, and some people can get a coach. If you can afford to have a coach who's familiar with Leadville, that's great. I know that's a luxury for some folks. It's not going to work for you, but do a lot of reading. There's a lot of materials out there, a lot of good stuff, and create your own training program sort of based on what you know about yourself. And you can borrow from all these different sources and cobble together your own program. And then, what I always say is write it in pencil, because if you've got a certain ride plan for a certain day and you're going to go out and get, 4-hour ride, but the weather's terrible, move the ride. Don't do it that day. Do it on another day. My training's always written in pencil, because then I can shift things around based on life or weather or whatever. And I just don't let it get into my head. You just try to keep that positive attitude, that positive energy going. And I think that'll take folks a long way.
Oh man. Yeah. Are you a real food guy or a science food guy?
Real food for the most
Real
part.
food?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would your Leadville menu be?
Well, what it always was, some gels. I like the goo products, and but not a ton of them. But I'm kind of doing some gels here and there, and then a peanut butter and jelly bagel is what I had every single Leadville after I got through Twin Lakes coming back. I'd have a bagel and peanut butter. It's hard to eat. It's terrible. Again, I probably do a lot of the wrong stuff, and I could have been maybe better if I'd done it differently. But for me, it was that, and I'd grab a can of Starbucks double shot in Pipeline inbound, and get that little coffee thing going. And but I've never been a big caffeine. Like, I don't like the caffeine gels. I like my gels without caffeine. But in the Leadville or long races, I would do that sort of coffee shot drink toward the end. And a lot of times my stomach was, it wasn't great at the end, because you're pushing your body, you're going hard, you're putting a lot of stuff into it. But I didn't really. And then of course typical the goo, the drinks, the hydration and electrolyte drinks, have those going. But I'm not a huge drinker. I'm a bit of a camel, so I would drink maybe. If I drank 4 bottles during Leadville, that'd be quite a bit.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I've never been a big drinker. 5 at the most. I just can't do it. But everyone's different, and so you need to find out what works for you. But I do know you can do too much, and a lot of people do that. They just cram all kinds of stuff in their body, and then they just feel terrible. You probably need to test these products out during training to know, and then have a strategy. Know you're going to do, what your intake is going to be and how you're going to get it, on your person, because you probably can't carry all that from the beginning, but you're going to get it from your crew at different times, and just have a plan for how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, for the most part. I mean, mine was planned, but it was pretty loose. I'm going to try to do, a couple, 2 or 3 gels on the way to Twin Lakes, and we'd always skip pipeline going out. Now it's really hard for crews to move around because the course is so crowded. And I would do Twin Lakes back, and then the crew have to really hustle to get from Twin Lakes to pipeline. They would just be showing up usually as we rolled through. So you have that too. But another way to do the race, if you don't have a crew, is by the neutral support. And you just roll to that neutral station, you fill your bottles or your Camelback, you grab a couple things, and you go. You can do well. The bummer about that is if you're with a group, you're probably going to lose that group having to stop. But you can do the Leadville 100, and you can earn a buckle based on with nobody there to help you. And there's something kind of compelling and freeing about that kind of racing too, because crewing's more stressful. I crewed a few years for the Topeak Ergon team, and crewing's more stressful than racing. You can actually relax on your bike and just ride it and race. But crewing, it's just, you're kind of on pins and needles the whole time.
I know they used to have a shirt back in the day that said, "I'm not here for a good time. I'm here for a long time. I'm the crew."
Very true.
How true, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So I think maybe the last question here, if you, in Dave's national champion shape, with new technology, with new fueling, with new power meters, with all apples to apples, we're just going to shift time frames. You going to break 5:43?
Yeah. I'd love to think I could, but I don't think so, just because it's those of us that were involved in mountain biking early, we just we were the best at the time, and now there's the development channels and the number of riders that are out there doing it. The cream that rises to the top just keeps getting richer and richer. And yeah, sure, in my fantasy I'd like to think that, but the reality is, Keegan and then that whole clot of riders that are chasing Keegan are super strong. And luckily we can't make that time machine work, so we're not going to find out. But yeah, go out there and line up with a bunch of 59 and 60-year-olds, I guess.
Oh man. Well, Todd Murray ended up, he said this year in 2023, he said, "This year I'm going to be selfish because you turned 60," and he went for the win in his age group and he got it. And Todd's the 30, he's 29 for 29.
Right.
Yeah. So do you have any insight on what the 30-year buckle is?
No, nothing.
No, I don't either. I have no idea. I know there was some scuttlebutt, talk about, a revolver being the trophy instead of a buckle, or, at one point, do you get what was it? The Geico buckle guy that had the cowboy with the buckle that was, this big, that insurance commercial or whatever it was. But
my question is, do they still give out the Orcart? Is the Orcart trophy still, does the winner get the Orcart?
I think if I remember, it was the pan.
Well, you got a pan to win your age group, and then the winner of the race got an Orcart. I know because I've got quite a few of them all around wherever they are. It's a big, heavy, dangerous trophy.
Oh, yeah. It slipped off. You could actually come off the tracks, right?
Oh, and it's filled with rocks, and it was very tippy because it was shaped like an Orcart. And it was when we had small kids around the house, but we never had them displayed or anything. They're just in boxes and stuff. But it was kind of a dangerous trophy, hard trophy to transport around. But I know someone welded those things up and put tracks on a piece of the wood that came out of one of the mines that Ken would go get. They're super cool. I just wonder if they still do that.
Well, the awards ceremony has changed quite a bit. Right. When you cross the finish line, you go in the next 50 feet, you go and get your buckle. right
Oh,
then.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
so they have done away with the Sunday morning racer meeting, award ceremony, farewell to your friends and racers thing.
Really? Completely. That's gone.
That's gone. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Sunday morning is the run, the short run,
Yeah,
and
10K.
yeah, and then the cleanup. I think a lot of it, and I'm guessing, but I think it was about people trying to get back home.
Sure.
Either that or just the logistics for the lifetime people. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, but my understanding prior was that Ken and Mara Lee said we need to bring people to Leadville and we want them to spend some time here, so they spend some money here on lodging and food. So we got the meeting on Friday, we got the race on Saturday, we keep around Sunday, and but they've achieved that. They were successful in that, and Leadville is no longer a struggling economy. So I could see where from a to simplify, they did that, but it was always quite an experience, I think, between the meeting and then of course race day, and then the follow up after that was it was pretty cool. So that's interesting to hear. I did not know that.
yeah, no, I loved it. I personally, I love the meeting, and then you get one last chance to see everybody you race with and say goodbye and that sort of thing. And
Oh yeah,
when you get your buckle at the end of the race on Saturday, people are dispersing, and you don't have it. You don't have quite the same opportunity.
yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And well, everyone who's done it knows this. There's a certain energy stress that happens all the way up to the race and the start, and then maybe there's an exhale once the race starts. Everybody's kind of sorted out on the course, and then when you're done, you're just so free and light compared to what you were just a half a day before, when you were super fired up and high strung, and that release is really it's really powerful.
For sure.
That next day allowed a lot of camaraderie to take place, which now probably dissipates a little bit quicker. No big deal.
Right. Well, all right, Dave. We're getting, it's been about an hour. Really appreciate your time, taking your time out of the day. Can't thank you enough. Love hearing it. I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy the stories, and maybe we'll do it again. Who knows?
Sure. No, Mike, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and have a great race this year. Maybe we'll see you up there.
I'll be there. I'll be there. All right, Leadville racers. I hope you enjoyed Dave's stories. I want to remind you about our alignment with CTS. Get my buckle, in the discount code saves you the athlete registration fee. And Bird wheels, the rope spoke carbon hoops, super light, super comfortable wheels. Bird buckle 2024, get you 10% off a wheel set. So thank you very much, and we'll see you at the finish line.